Hello, everybody, and welcome to the It's and Queens podcast covering the last week in February 2018. That's February 22nd to February 28th. As always, I am Rob Mackay from the Queens Tourism Council, a co-sponsor of the podcast, along with the man to my left, Chris Donovan from the Daily News. Chris, how are you?
I'm great, Rob. How are you, bud?
I'm doing good. We decided to spice things up a little bit. I'm going with the wet look, and Chris has a new hairstyle, in case you haven't noticed.
Looking good on both sides, right?
Is that what you call a high and tight, or
Yes.
something like that?
I'm trying to go for, I told the guy, give me an undercut, and I didn't know what that actually meant.
Oh, really? Yeah. All right.
I know the hipsters look good in it, but I don't think I can pull it off. But I'm trying.
All right. Well, shave it into a goatee. We'll see how it works. Anyway, what we're going to talk about first tonight is something that's actually a very big event. It's drawing people from around the country and even Canada to it. I kind of feel bad because it's not really something for vegetarians and vegans, but we're still going to lead with it. It is Charcuterie Masters, which is basically a cold cuts contest. You're going to have people that make pate, salami, sausage, coming from around the world to Flushing Town Hall on February 24th, basically vying for the best, to win awards, to be the best charcuterie master of the year. What do you think about that?
It's a very interesting way to prepare and serve food. A lot of it is cold meat.
Cold meats.
So it's not something you would normally look at as appetizing, but I've had a lot of these dishes in the restaurants that they're served in, and they are absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I actually went last year, and I ate so much, really salty sausage meat.
Oh yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
You got to get in there, make sure you're drinking your water.
Yes, I was very salty.
Take your high blood pressure meds, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But there are a lot of different kinds of basically cold cuts out there. I mean, there are the Italians, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Hungarians, the Germans. There are a lot of different kinds of ways to shall we
it's an
say,
old school method, right? It's when meat wouldn't last so long, so you had to find
so
different ways to kind of preserve it and keep it around. And there are people who have now picked up the gauntlet and kind of ran with it, and now are masters at their craft.
And there's all kinds of spices that go into that.
That's right.
Maybe the vegetarians or the vegans could protest in front, so we could say that this is an event for all.
Yeah, right.
An inclusive event.
Right. The meat eaters go inside, the vegetarians and the vegans hang outside, and everyone's there. And although not in harmony, but at least everyone is there.
I'd also like to add that Fifth Hammer Brewing, which is one of our new Queens-based breweries, will be providing the suds for the event.
Look at that. So is this an over 21 event?
It's an over no. But to drink.
To drink would be
obviously.
over 21, but anyone can attend.
And I think that with Fifth Hammer Brewing, do we have 8 breweries in Queens now?
Single Cut, Rockaway,
Big Alice,
Finback. That's 4 right there.
Fifth Hammer right here.
Right.
LIC Beer Project.
LIC, nice.
We're pretty close.
We're close.
Yeah.
And Queens Brewery, we forgot almost.
And Queens Brewery.
Yeah.
So that puts us close.
Now that we should mention that this is our buddy Joe DeStefano. That
if you watch this podcast, it's organized by the same guy who was here.
Regular watchers and regular listeners.
Right.
It's in Queens Heads, right?
It's in Queens Heads, right? You can get. We should have a new driver's license or a license plate you could get. It's in Queens Nation.
Yeah, we have to start thinking about merch at this point. I think this podcast is there.
The other thing I wanted to come at you second was John Guare, the Kupferberg Center for the Arts, which of course is located on Queens College's campus, is kicking off a reading series. And the first one is going to be periodical, basically monthly. And it's the first one is February 27th at Left Rack Concert Hall, which is on the campus. It's actually just off Casino Boulevard near the Long Island Expressway. Has perfect acoustics.
Perfect acoustics. We
Absolutely.
talked about that before. Yeah.
And John, well, first of all, he's going to be in conversation with the Time Out New York editor and chief theater critic, who's a guy named Adam Feldman.
Mm-hmm.
John Guare himself is a Tony Award-winning playwright. I know he did 6 Degrees of Separation.
That's right. And he also, although he's a famous playwright, he also wrote the screenplay for Atlantic City with Burt Lancaster and Susan Sarandon.
Okay. So
Yeah.
he's yeah, well,
He's an accomplished
playwright, scripts,
screenwriter,
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. It's also kind of fun that it's kicking off another thing. And a Mexican author by the name of Valerie Luisei is going to be on March 6th, which is, I guess, only a week after that. There's a panel discussion with a bunch of different playwrights. And then there is another playwright named Doug Wright and the Queens College MFA program in creative writing and literacy will also be presenting an
All right,
event.
so this is kicking
Coming
everything
up
off.
from February 27th straight through until April 10th. They'll be coming on periodically. Sounds kind of fun, especially if you like the written word. And sometimes conversations about how creative people get creative is really more interesting than the actual what they create.
Very true.
After that, after the written word, what about the moving image?
Oh, look at that.
Specifically, what's going on at the Museum of Moving Image in the Kaufman Arts District in Astoria. There's a science fiction festival, which is actually happening in a couple of boroughs, happening in Manhattan, but Queens is taking part. It's called the Philip K. Dick Science Film Fiction Festival. Do you have any idea who this guy is?
So yeah, luckily,
Good, because
So-
I don't.
I had to obviously look it up. I'm not coming off the dome with this one, but I had heard the name before, and I just didn't associate it with what he did. But he's Blade Runner is one of his movies.
Okay.
Total Recall, Minority Report, and Scanner Darkly, which was a very kind of cool film the way they visually presented it. It was done with rotoscope, which is where they take each frame and sort of draw over it and make it sort of look like a cartoon, even though it's live action.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
that Scanner Darkly was with who's Iron Man? Robert Downey Jr.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a good one.
So, Ayla, Ayla, is one of his movies. It's going to show on February 23rd, and The Child Remains is going to show on February 24th at the Museum of the Moving Image. Now, as we know, the Museum of the Moving Image actually has a couple of theaters.
One more thing about Philip K. Dick
Sure.
before we move on. A lot of his themes, I looked this up again, and I think it sort of resonates with the tones of the country right now.
Sure.
Talks about monopolistic corporations, so you can think about maybe
Google
like
and
a Google or
Facebook?
Facebook,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
All right.
Alternative universes and authoritarian governments.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, very interesting
Wow, okay.
themes. So that's
That
that'll
sounds
be with
somewhat
Philip K. Dick.
timely.
Yeah.
So at the same place on February 25th, they're actually showing rarely shown films about sea creatures and scientists. They did this last year, I remember. They had all kinds of they had films of all kinds of sea creatures mating, so you could the starfish and all that kind of stuff. What I think is interesting about this is you can see a whole series of movies. These are from the 1930s, rarely seen films, but Jacques Cousteau's son, Fabien Cousteau,
There you go.
will be there.
That was
to
the same
discuss-
thing that I looked up
Yeah.
and found very fascinating.
Yeah.
Because as a kid, Jacques Cousteau was the man when it
He
came
was
to
the
the
man
water.
for those of us who are our age. He used his films of him in the water, and his son is carrying on the legend. So there'll be you can watch films, and afterwards there'll be a discussion with him and another scientist by the name of Howard Rosenbaum. So that sounds kind of fun.
And
doesn't
now
it?
some of the films are going to feature some work done by Floyd Crosby, who is the father of David Crosby from Crosby, Stills and Nash.
So it's a father and son reunion, or actually it's a son and son.
Son
reunion.
and son, yeah.
So that sounds kind of fun. Now, I would say that I want to ask you a question. If we talk about the next issue, if I tell you the word head, what comes to mind right ahead? HEAD, all capital letters.
There was a Monkees movie called Head.
Very
That was
interesting.
kind of a weird psycho trip movie.
Okay.
That's the first thing.
Very
and then
good.
Head tennis rackets. I remember.
Head tennis rackets.
Yeah, when I
Very
worked at
interesting.
Paragon, I used to sell those.
Well, there is a February 26th, 25th, 22nd, excuse me, I'm wrong and wrong.
Wrong,
February 22nd, there is the opening reception for a new art show at the Factory LIC. It's part of the LIC Arts Open, where they asked a bunch of artists to respond to the word, in all caps, head. And so all of the pieces that you will see at the gallery are these guys, these artists' responses. And I think that's kind of fun. You never know creative minds what they can do.
I saw some of the photos of the offerings, and they looked very interesting. So,
Yeah,
yeah, and it's multimedia, right? It's
it's going to be all kinds of all
different
kinds of
mediums, different. They're different using clay, metal, and
yeah,
paintings
it's
and audio, video.
anything goes.
That's right.
Anything
Yeah.
goes. Truly,
And
anything
the other
goes.
part about where it's being held is the factory in LIC happens to be like a place where Ralph Lauren and J. Crew have space
Oh,
inside.
it's like an art con, like an art building.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Jay,
Creative minds, right? All
yeah.
creative minds in
Ah,
there.
okay, so it's in one of those buildings where there are a bunch of studios.
Very cool.
Yeah, I went to a studio art crawl there once. You went on to different people's.
The LIC,
Art's
the
very
LIC
nice.
Arts Open's been around for a couple of years now. They've been putting together
Yep.
cool shows, right?
Fantastic. Speaking of the creative process and being creative, the Astoria Performing Arts Center starting actually last week. They're holding these play in development events where plays that are not quite finished are presented in front of an audience, and the playwright and everyone actually seeks input from the audience. So you can go watch
A work in progress,
a work
basically.
in progress, and you can actually be part of the creative progress. You
Right.
can make the play better. or
That's
you
right.
can- and on February 23rd, now there's a play called Purgatorio, which is written by a playwright by the name of Andrea Thome. And I'm just going to read to you what it says. A child named Pilgrim journeys through a landscape with a guide who may be a poet, a trickster, or a figure from the child's imagination. So that's something to think about. You
And
can-
also fitting in these troubled times that we're in, Purgatory is a place of migrants in this story. So it's where they're leaving their old country before they get to the new country. And
okay, you got to pray for them so they can go to
so
the
they can
new
get to
country.
right,
That's
right.
February 27th, they're doing the same thing. The play is called The More They Stay by Ricardo Perez Gonzalez. Again, and this is a story about two gay men who are in their 80s, and they're having a dinner for their adopted son and his boyfriend. So the son is gay too, and the dinner the dinner is kind of a goodbye. I think the son is moving away. And so the question is, the goodbye. Whose terms is the goodbye on, and all that kind of stuff. So it sounds.
It also sounded like there might be a little euthanasia talk in there.
Well,
saying
they're in their
goodbye,
80s. They're in
right?
their
Yeah.
80s. The kid's moving out. So it sounds like these in the other one, the artists are responding to the word head in all capitals. In this, it's goodbye.
That's
in
right.
a lot of different ways.
And
the
this-
temporary, the permanent, everything else.
This guy also uses a lot of segregation in his work. So I think the people who are the main characters are also different races.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
so they talk
Gotcha.
about that.
Gotcha. The other fun thing about these two plays is that they're taking place at the Zucker Theater, which is part of Kaufman Astoria Studios. The Zucker Theater is a little theater off on the side that really not many people know about.
I haven't been there.
Yeah, and it's basically where Zucker, the guy who went on to found Paramount Pictures in Hollywood, it's where he got his start.
Oh, no
it's-
kidding.
Yeah, so it's
Got some
it's
history
really
behind
historic.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's where he used to do all his editing and watch all his stuff. So we don't want to take up too much more of your time. So I'm just going to leave some other things we have is a jazz. There's a tenor saxophone named Eric Alexander and his quartet. They're going to be performing on February 23rd at Flushing Town Hall. Kind of fun because he's actually going to be playing with one of his mentors, who is a
Ah.
pianist by the name of Harold Mauburn. Do you have any mentors in your life?
Well, you are one of my mentors and my hero. And when a hero comes along.
Okay.
Yeah. But he did interesting about Eric
Look
Alexander.
at this.
He finished second In 1991, Thelonious Monk International Jazz Saxophone Competition.
Okay.
And that's where he got his start and sort of made his name.
You can't say that Chris didn't do his homework before
That's
coming
right.
to
No, it
this.
just came right off the top of my head. What are you talking about?
And there's also kind of an interesting conversation at the New York Hall of Science about editing the human genome. And now that science is, we can really basically almost create tailor-made babies.
That's right.
Question is, there are a lot of questions about the ethics of it.
There's
and
a
all that
lot of
kind
ethics
stuff.
involved. Like, do we
What should
create
be
a
banned?
baby, right, without any, with the, immunity to all diseases,
Exactly. Create
and
the super baby. So
who
that's,
should be allowed to do it, right?
right. That's kind of interesting. That's on February 24th
At New York Hall of
at
Science.
the New York Hall of Science.
I think a kid named Liam Donovan likes that place.
Would that be your son?
It would be. Look at that.
Yeah.
You knew it.
United African Dance will be performing on February 24th at Jamaica Performing Arts Center. That's the last of a series of Black History Month events that they're doing over there. There's something called a Chat and Chew, which is a video presentation and discussion of Black political and social history in Corona and East Elmhurst. In East Elmhurst on February 24th. They have a very active historical society there.
Right.
There's
a lot of history in East Elmhurst.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
history there, and they love their neighborhood. They loved growing up there, and they're very proud. A lot of people like Ella Fitzgerald lived there, and Willie Mays, and Malcolm X. And
That was
some of these people grew up with, like one person I know that's in that group. One of the organizers has memories of Willie Mays' son.
no kidding.
Hanging out with Willie Mays' son.
That's
and
pretty
stuff.
cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of fun. There is Sunday Jazz Brunch at the Bayside Historical Society. There is a lecture by Dr. David Engel, who is a Holocaust scholar on basically the Holocaust in Poland. And I guess I should mention one more thing, which would be the See It Big series. Brings us back to the Museum of the Moving Image. Very active. The Museum of the Moving Image.
Lots of
They are
programming.
always going. They have a series that they do every year called See It Big, which is basically where they take classic movies and put them on the big screen in their biggest theater over there.
Okay.
And the series goes on and on. It starts this coming up week with 2 screenings of Wuthering Heights and 2 screenings of Gone with the Wind. That's on February 24th and February 25th. I would like to add that they're going to show other movies like Black Narcissus, other classics.
Okay.
They'll be going on in future weeks.
It's like Turner Classic Movies
It's
came
like,
to Queens.
but you can see it on the big screen.
Right.
I
You
think
know-
I saw The Wiz on the big screen there
Oh.
once over there. And
I went
it's
to a
fun.
show at Radio City last night, and that's actually where I saw a lot of movies growing up because my grandmother used to take me there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we did also a lot of
There
movies
you
there. One last thing, the Queens Theater had a little bit of an issue last week. They had a water main break. I think they're back up in business though.
There was they had this Broadway love song thing
Yeah.
going on that we talked about in the last thing, and there was a water main break in Flushing Meadows Corona Park, and so they had to cancel all their shows, which also included the Titan Theater Companies.
That's right.
So they had to cancel all their shows that week. Unfortunately, it was a busy weekend for them, but everything is resolved. And they will reschedule, and we'll let you know about the other stuff.
And
going
upcoming
on.
for them is the Beauty of Ballet at the Queens Theater.
That's
So they
this
do-
weekend too. They
Yep.
have the American School of Ballet will be there, basically teaching and dancing at the same time. Right,
Right,
Answering
showing how it's
questions.
done, answering questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a really cool event. So if you weren't able to get out there last week, head over there this
Right.
week.
That is it, I think, for this week, which is, of course, February 22nd to February 28th, 2018. Again, all of this information and more is on itsinqueens.com. That's itsinqueens.com. Also follow us on Twitter, #itsinqueens.com, and you can read about all this stuff, too.
And buy a T-shirt on itsinqueens.com.
You can
And
also
It's
buy
in Queens
an
T-shirt.
It's in Queens T-shirt.
That's right.
And thank you very much for watching this podcast, and please enjoy some of these wonderful things that we have.